Hello and welcome to Original Soundchat, where video game music is a work of art. On each episode, it's our goal to help you learn about 2 soundtracks from the world of games, as well as the people, stories, and critical tracks behind them. My name is DeVader.
And I'm Peter Spezia. We're brought to you by Anonymous Dinosaur and Rhymes with Asia. It's time to appreciate great OSTs and the games that they come from, without getting too bogged down in music theory. Joe, what are this week's games?
Up first is 1998's House of the Dead 2, a rail-shooting adventure through the zombie-filled canals of Venice, complete with some of the best worst voice acting there has ever been.
Following that is Sega's first ever published game on a Nintendo platform, with exuberant marble rolling madness that would kick off a simian series. 2001's Super Monkey Ball. I don't know how this fell the way it did. I know Monkey Ball makes sense to talk about this week, this day, release day in particular, but
if you think about it, this was a called shot on my end because House of the Dead has been planned for this week for months on my end. So
that's true.
I'm just a genius. Let's go with that.
Yeah, you called the Sega shot. These are both Sega games that originally released in arcades, only a few years apart, but ultimately on different platforms altogether when it came to consoles. But yeah, that's the theme this week.
And it sure is a theme. And also it's the start of, hey baby, it's October!
Ooh, spooky!
Also, this episode goes up the day that the Smash character gets announced.
Yeah!
So we don't know who it is yet.
We don't, but let's talk about that a little bit. Who do you think it's gonna be, the final character?
I have 2 very out there calls, neither of which I think will be it, but if they are, I'm going to feel like a genius. If it's first party, I think it's going to be Ayumi Tachibana. I have no reason except for Sakurai wanted to put her in a Smash game one time, but didn't.
Yeah, Sakurai's Last Stand, right?
And then second, if it's third party, I'm going to throw some money behind Phoenix Wright.
Ooh.
I think that would be fun.
I would love to see that. That'd be fantastic. So I think you're right. It does all boil down to if it is first or third party. And, I think obviously the undefeated prediction is that the internet's going to be mad.
Yeah.
One way or the other. Like, they'll be disappointed. Let's remember that Bayonetta as the last character was only because of that Smash ballot. So I don't think there's really any precedent to a character ending the kind of Smash reveals being, someone that people are happy with in general, that aside. So I'll still hold out the hope for Sora. Hope against all hopes, even though it doesn't make any logical sense. But you know what? I feel like that's the one. If anyone is going to be, a multitude of people will be happy with the pick, I think Sora is the one, even though it's, against all reason. For first party, I like that pick. That's a good one for Famicom Detective Club.
I just want to know how she'd play.
Right?
What would she do? I need to... Sakurai obviously had some form of idea for her back in Melee. I want to know!
I wouldn't put a Pokemon past, Sakurai to put it out there.
Yeah, that's my worst case scenario.
Right? It could be. I don't know. Crash is always out there, but with Activision, who knows?
I mean, to be fair, if Crash was in, this deal would have been made long before any of this Activision stuff started coming to light.
Oh, of course, but that would just be really unfortunate timing. Anyway, We'll see. We'll know when this comes out. Hopefully, at least shortly. Later this morning. Who knows? But wow, I'm sure you're excited for Smasher Pieces.
I'm excited to fill in the last cell of my spreadsheet.
Surprise! It's Arthur from Ghosts and Goblins. Okay.
Oh, God.
In the meantime, let's quickly hit on a couple composer follow-up news. It's only been a couple days since we've recorded the last episode. Let's be honest. Let's pull back the curtain a little bit, but we still have a couple headlines of composers or musicians in the industry we've talked about on the show before doing cool things. Let's talk about Gareth Coker. He won a pretty prominent award, the Evors Award, for Best Original Video Game Score in 2021. Went to Ori and the Will of the Wisps.
Yeah.
Look, I know they're normally a bit behind the times. It's a little wait for that, I suppose, for a 2020 game, but it's a well-deserved award. That score is fantastic.
Yeah, I can get behind that. It is weird that it's getting that award in September of 2021. When that game came out when? Like
March of 20? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, God, it's been so long. Meanwhile, Emmy Evans, whom we have talked about in the past because she is the lyricist and vocalist behind many songs on the soundtrack of the Nier series, she is actually apparently involved in the soundtrack of Star Wars Visions. I don't know exactly what short she is. If you do not know, Star Wars Visions is the series of shorts that Disney sort of commissioned from a bunch of major anime studios over in Japan. And I've heard very good things. I haven't had a chance to watch them yet. But Emmy Evans is apparently somewhere in at least one of their soundtracks, and I'm looking forward to finding out which.
A big year for her, with her voice being featured in Nier Replicant and the Olympics, and now Star Wars Visions. Very cool.
And Chicory, the biggest of them all.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes.
All right. Everybody, it's October, baby. And that means, like every year, I force a theme upon the show, but only on my side. Because I love horror games and horror-themed games. And while I wouldn't call this game a horror game, let's talk about House of the Dead 2. It was originally released in arcades on November 20th, 1998. A Dreamcast release would follow in 1999. There's also, for some reason, a Windows release that happened in 2001. Isn't that where you want to play House of the Dead? And most recently, it was re-released alongside House of the Dead 3 for the Wii in 2008. Yes, that's the most recently. It was developed by WoW Entertainment and published by Sega. It is a rail shooter light gun game that is played from a first-person perspective, where the player must use a plastic gun prop to actually aim at the screen and shoot their way through waves of enemies. Basically, you'll hit an area, enemies will be approaching you, you have to kill them before they get to you and attack, etc., etc. There's really not much more to it than that. You can only be hit a certain amount of times. You reload, I think, by lowering and raising the gun. I don't remember. It's been a very long time, and I couldn't actually find somebody describing how you reload in House of the Dead 2. And that's it, basically. Different paths can be taken based on actions such as saving civilians, and also you can play it with 1 or 2 players. I absolutely love playing it with 2 players personally.
It sounds like a perfect game for a Wii re-release. I mean,
oh yeah,
with the light gun and the Wii remote. I mean, yeah, I'm glad they thought of doing that because that sounds made for it.
Yeah, it's an absolutely perfect place for it to be, and I don't think it would work as well on literally anything else except maybe the Switch. Which we'll get to that in a bit, because that is relevant. So, the first game in the House of the Dead franchise saw 2 agents of AMS battle through the Curian Mansion, a house/laboratory that experienced a zombie outbreak by the hands of the biochemist and geneticist that lived and worked there, Dr. Curian. Fun fact, if you're wondering, hey, why didn't you say what AMS stands for? It's because apparently we don't know. It has never been said. Apparently when the development team asked the director, hey, what does AMS stand for? His only response was, one day I'd like to make a prequel to show how AMS was founded. And that's not an answer, dude! Which leads me to believe that it doesn't stand for anything. There's nothing. It's not there. So 2 years after this incident at the Curian Mansion, 2 AMS agents by the name of James Taylor and Gary Stewart are sent to Venice, Italy, to meet up with one of the main characters from the first game, an AMS agent known only as G, who has been looking into what remained of Dr. Curian's research in the Venice area. But before they can find G, they are stopped by an impish flying creature known as Zeal, who, in the best voice acting there has ever been in any video game ever, informs them that he has already taken care of G, and they're next. From there, the squad of AMS agents in Venice find themselves in the middle of yet another terrifying zombie outbreak, with their mission being to save and evacuate the citizens of the city while attempting to find out who is behind this new outbreak. Can they escape Venice with their lives, or will they suffer like G did? So here's where I'll ask Peter, what are our experiences with House of the Dead 2?
Wow, that voice acting of Zeal sure is something. I do not have much experience at all with playing House of the Dead 2, but it's one of those games where, like, yeah, you see video footage of it or voice acting clips of it, right? So there's some very loose familiarity there, but I think, if anything, I'm more familiar with the typing variation.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a bit, baby.
Uh-huh. But that's really about it.
House of the Dead is pretty much always the first arcade machine I look for when I go to an arcade, which hasn't been for a few years, and especially not recently for, reasons. But I adore playing House of the Dead. I know basically nothing about it. I've sure as hell never beaten one. I mean, they're arcade games. They're built to eat your money. But House of the Dead 2 has a special place in my heart simply because of that voice acting. It's all so bad. It's all so bad. It is the best. It is like made for me. All of it is terrible. All of it it's the voice acting. That's why I like this game. But why did I decide to bring it to the show? I actually was watching somebody stream it a couple months ago and thought like, oh, you know what? This soundtrack's pretty cool. I think we should talk about it. Which I do think it is a very good soundtrack. But yeah, House of the Dead is just like an arcade mainstay for me. It's the first place I go, regardless of what arcade I walk into. Unfortunately, though, I could not find pretty much any information on how House of the Dead 2 specifically was developed. So I decided to jump back a little bit and talk about a couple of tidbits about its predecessor that I found kind of funny. Obviously, I'm not taking a deep dive into House of the Dead 1 because we're not talking about House of the Dead 1, but you might be wondering, hey, why is it called House of the Dead? I mean, the easy answer is because the first game takes place in a mansion full of zombies, but apparently that's not why it's called that.
What?
According to Wikipedia, this name came about because none of the development team spoke English, but they wanted a cool-sounding English name for their game. So they took a bunch of horror-adjacent Japanese words and concepts, translated them to English, and picked the one that looked the coolest when printed in English.
Oh my gosh, why am I getting like Tak Fuji vibes right now?
It's the greatest idea for how to come up with a video game name ever. Both of the games, House of the Dead 1 and 2, and I assume 3 as well, but I'm not sure, they are actually built on the same engine as a different Sega rail shooter light gun game called Virtua Cop, which I've never played Virtua Cop, but I am aware of the Virtua quote-unquote series.
Brand?
Yeah, I guess it would be closer to call it a brand. I don't know. It's really weird. So, they knew that the game would be received differently based on its level of violence in different countries. Wikipedia specifically name drops Germany, but I'm gonna assume that Australia at that time was probably also among the countries they had to worry about. I don't think Australia had started mellowing out on video game ratings and bannings at this point yet. And so to combat this, they decided to build in an option that would allow arcade operators to change the color of the blood from red to green, purple, or blue. Green makes sense. I've seen that everywhere. It has like a biohazard feeling to it.
Mm-hmm.
But purple or blue?
I mean, Danganronpa has pink.
I mean, yeah, but that still makes more sense than purple or blue. There were also apparently female zombies in the original game, and they were cut out because, quote, they felt she looked too much like a normal elderly woman.
Oh no.
Which could provoke controversy given that the player is encouraged to shoot the zombie.
Yeah, when the graphics technology is only so good at the time, that was probably a good dodge on their part.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and give them that one. I think they made a good decision. House of the Dead 2 reviewed pretty well when it was released, with Arcade Magazine Game Machine stating that it was the third most successful arcade game of 1998. The Dreamcast version currently has a 77 on game rankings, so it was fine. It reviewed fine. But also, the Dreamcast version was largely criticized for not having a light gun accessory to go with it. What were you doing?
But was that, considered as a possible technology on Dreamcast at the time? Is it even on PC?
It released on PC, but I don't know if it does light guns. Nobody talked about the PC version as far as I could tell, because why would you go play House of the Dead on a PC? Come on. Unless it's the version that we like.
I mean, yeah, you could see it in an arcade for sure, but I feel like it's an interesting critique against it when it's like, well, the technology just doesn't exist in the home console or the personal computer space. That's interesting.
I mean, but the light gun technology did exist. It existed back in the NES days. Duck Hunt.
Well, yeah, but you're going to sell a peripheral to go on the corner of your CRT and make it way more expensive than it needs to be. I mean, so yeah, it exists, but is that going to be built in the cost? So anyway, that's just kind of spiraling out from the point.
At a certain point, you just need to ask, then why did you guys bother putting the light gun game on this?
Fair. Because a keyboard version could go better instead.
All of the versions saw criticism for the game's very, very bad voice acting. But again, the people that claimed this was a bad thing are weak because it's so good it's bad, and there are a few critics who agreed with me. It's just so bad. It's worse than the original Resident Evil's voice acting. And that is a low bar.
There's a je ne sais quoi part of a charm to it.
Especially with Zeal's voice. It's so bad.
Oh, yeah.
There's also, I was watching a long play to sort of refresh myself before we recorded. There was a civilian that the long player saved, and it was a woman, and she said, "Thank you for saving me." And it was so obviously just a guy talking like this.
Oh,
and
no.
it was, oh my God, it was amazing. Or people that'll be chased by zombies, and then when you kill the zombies before they can kill the person, they just sort of stop panicking, "Thank you for saving me," and then walk away calm. Oh, it's so stupid. I love this game. As mentioned before, the game would release on PC in 2001 and the Wii alongside House of the Dead 3 in 2008. The Wii version did not review as well as it did back in the day, a Metacritic of 66, with a lot of criticism thrown towards not only the poor performance of House of the Dead 3, apparently, but also the fact that the collection comes with no extras. It's just those two games.
And yeah, 10 years will age that, certainly.
Yeah, a little bit, I'm sure. I think they added a melee attack mechanic, and as far as I could tell, that's all they added to that release. But who cares about any of that? Because House of the Dead 2 is the one that was reworked and re-released as a keyboard typing game, Typing of the Dead.
Yeah, baby!
Did you know there were arcade cabinets for Typing of the Dead?
I mean, it doesn't surprise me. If you got the light guns, put the keyboards out there, go for it.
And apparently, House of the Dead 2 was also turned into a DS game called English of the Dead, with much the same premise, but this time to teach English. But Typing of the Dead is such a dumb thing to exist, and I love it dearly. In-game, they reskinned the characters. They're not holding guns anymore. They actually have, keyboards and a Dreamcast strapped to their back. It's awesome. It's so good.
It's fantastic. I didn't know about English of the Dead. An unbelievably dumb, weird, terrible title, but it makes sense on the DS if you're trying to write out. Yeah, okay, I can see it.
Yeah, I also did not know that English of the Dead existed. Apparently, House of the Dead 2 also had a GBA game based on it called Pinball of the Dead, but I don't know a lot about that one. The most recent release in the series of House of the Dead is 2018's House of the Dead Scarlet Dawn, which I was under the impression that House of the Dead was dead, but it's not apparently. So that's cool. There's also a parody of House of the Dead that you can play in Judgment, based on a fusion of House of the Dead gameplay and assets from the Yakuza zombie game, Yakuza Dead Souls.
Interesting.
But it's absolutely 100% supposed to be a House of the Dead send-up. Also, Uwe Boll made a movie based on the first game.
Huh.
Or as based on something as an Uwe Boll movie couldn't be.
Okay, yeah, he's a character. I knew about Postal, I didn't know about that.
Yeah. There are apparently 2 House of the Dead movies, but only one of them was made by Uwe Boll, so... He sure is a person that does things that could legally be called films. So, one of the 2 composers for House of the Dead 2 is a man by the name of Tetsuya Kawauchi. He joined Sega in 1995, where he was apparently the leader of the AM1 sound team, AM1 being the studio that would eventually be renamed to WoW Entertainment, and then later Sega WoW. As far as I could tell, he left the industry in 2004 because there is no website that has any credits for him later than that year. That's all the information I could find. I went to 3 different sources that usually have information I'm looking for, and that's all I had.
I was having a tough time with mine too, so maybe it's just a theme with these early Sega composers.
Potentially. In terms of his discography, he did the music for Manx TT Superbike. Don't know what that is, but good name. The House of the Dead, the first one. He was a sound designer on the fighting game Fighting Vipers, which I believe is in Yakuza 6? Or it might be in Judgment. I don't remember, but it's in one of the Yakuza games. Sega Water Ski, and of course House of the Dead 2. He was a sound director on the game Zombie Revenge. He's the sound designer on The Typing of the Dead, obviously. Did sound on Virtua Golf, and was a sound coordinator on Blood Will Tell, Tezuka Osamu's Dororo. And that is the last credit that I'm able to find of his anywhere. Alongside him, the soundtrack was also composed by Haruyoshi Tomita. Okay, well, I'd say I've talked enough about House of the Dead 2, but I could talk about this game until I die, but I've run out of information to give, so let's jump into the Critical 5. I think this game has a very of its time, but very fun soundtrack. So let's start with the first critical track, House of the Dead 2 Theme. So I think this song was composed by Haruyoshi Tomita. It's kind of difficult to tell for this track specifically. I looked in a few places, couldn't really find anything concrete. But hey, there's some organ. Yeah, baby. The cheesy B-movie horror organ that I crave in my life for games like this. Like, very overdramatic, very cheesy, playing it up a bunch. I don't know, I think this song is fun.
It's pretty simple, but it sets that kind of mood immediately. You're right. I love the big, chord. It's really just trying to ooh, we're scary. It's a treat.
It's the pinnacle of what our friend Matt would refer to as Halloween horror.
Yes.
This is the Halloween disc that you put on outside your house for trick-or-treaters or something.
You throw it in with some sound effects of like wolves going woo 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 woo, or ghosts kind of going around. Yeah, for sure.
Let's go a little bit away from the sort of cheesy B-movie horror vibe and get a little more high action. It's Critical Track number 2, Tragedy Again. This song was composed by Tetsuya Kawauchi. This is the music for Stage 1. I don't know, I really like this song. It has this cool high energy, which is good for a rail shooter where if you don't kill the enemies fast enough, you will die. And I don't know, I think this song is a really good way of keeping you on your toes. Also, at certain parts in the song, it like incorporates zombie moans. Which I think is honestly kind of a really cool thing for it to throw in there. It's weird, but then again, it's House of the Dead 2. If it wasn't weird, what would be the point?
Especially for the time to get some of those zombie moan vocal samples in there. That's really neat. Yeah, interesting to hear this one and be like, oh yeah, I have heard this song before. So kudos to the House of the Dead 2 for having this song be at least somewhat memorable in somewhere in the back of my head. Honestly, also a little weird that it's kind of like a dance track in a way. Like it's got a vibe. So, if they really wanted to, they could make a spin-off of like a rail shooter, a typing game, but also like a rhythm game, Dancing of the Dead.
Sega, this is free. Well, actually, it's not free. You should pay, Peter, but like,
yeah.
I'll come on as a supervisor. You can pay me too. That's a great idea, though. Holy, I want that. I want that so bad. That's actually absolutely what they'd call it. All right. Critical Check number 3 is actually my favorite song in the game, and also the worst name for a track I think either of us have ever encountered on this show. It's Enemies. Now you might be thinking to yourself, why is Enemies the worst title? Because it's not Enemies, it's ENEMY''S.
Oh, singular possessive? No.
And that's not a typo. That's what the song is called, apparently. This was composed by Haruyoshi Tomita. Plays during the bosses of stages 1 through 4. I think this is my favorite track in the game because I just really like the high energy to it. Though there are some really weird decisions, such as the fact that one of the instruments appears to be a wheel screeching on a car.
Mm-hmm.
But I also kind of like how some of the instruments are a little bit siren-like. I don't think this song should feel as cool as it does, but it certainly does. And honestly, I love this track.
Yeah, okay, you go on this one. Really, really neat high energy. I definitely can see it as a boss fight, so I think it's a good job kind of capturing that sort of intensity. But yeah, that title is oof.
I'm actually angry at that time. The enemies what? Enemies what? Anyway. Critical Track number 4. The next two are going to be the only two bosses of the game that have their own music track. The first one being Theme of the Magician. So this is where I should add that all of the bosses in this game are named after tarot arcana. I don't think they have anything to do with the tarot arcana that they are named after. They just happen to be named after tarot. You know how it is.
If you play Persona, you know how it is.
Yeah, pretty much. This one was composed by Tetsuya Kawauchi. It is the boss theme of Stage 5. It's the fight with the creature known as the Magician, who is apparently, I think, the final boss of House of the Dead 1 coming back for a sequence, which is pretty cool. I really like how this is a really high-energy boss theme. I mean, it's the penultimate boss fight of the entire game and the first to get their own theme. But also, this is 90s game as hell.
Oh, yeah.
This song might be the most 90s game song I've heard ever. It is so of its time, it is insane.
Just gonna throw out Dancing of the Dead again. This would fit super well in that, just saying. No, this is neat, and I think you're right. It's definitely tense in a different way, but you're right. I mean, channeling that kind of 90s electro pop dance vibe, it's different, but also with kind of that horror feel to it. It's a neat blend.
I think it's the organ that does because there is still some organ back there that really helps with the horror vibes.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, critical track number 5. If we're going to be talking about the theme of the penultimate boss, then we also need to talk about the theme of the final boss. And that is Theme of the Emperor. I assume mostly called the Emperor because he's the king. I don't know. I don't think it has anything to do with tarot. Once more. So this song is composed by Tetsuya Kawauchi. It is the final boss music for the fight with the Emperor. This one, I think, dials it back to cheesy horror vibe. Like very cheesy horror. This time with a bit of a more high energy boss fight, though not as high energy as the other 2 boss fights we talked about. When I hear this song, I think of like PS1 era Castlevania.
Yeah.
Like this feels like something I'd hear during a boss fight during an older Castlevania game. I do think that the high-pitched strings and surprisingly the not super great brass MIDI somehow actually manages to work and sound kind of good in the context of this stupid game. I think it works in its advantage somehow. I really dig how this song comes together.
It does feel simpler in a way. I think you're right, kind of echoing back to a previous generation like PS1 Castlevania. It's kind of keeping that gothic horror B-movie kind of sound, but it's like more focused on like there's kind of the rhythm and the backing and the kind of bass under it, but then it's just like single melody on top. Like we're not going to worry too much about any counter melodies or complexity to it. It's like very straightforward. That's the gist I get from this one.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. All right, tracks of the cutting room floor. My first one is another stage song. Apparently, though, it's also a rearranged track from the first House of the Dead, which was news to me. I don't think I've ever even seen footage of the first House of the Dead. It is AMS Agent. This actually plays during the second stage of the game when you're running around the streets of Venice and jumping into the canals, which is really funny because you'll just walk by like a group of zombies chasing somebody in the water and they're in the canal and they're like, "Help me!" And I have nothing to say, but why are you in the water? Why did you jump into the canal? This song was composed by Tetsuya Kawauchi, and again, like I said, it is a rearranged track from the original House of the Dead, apparently. Though which one that is, I would not know. It might still be called AMS Agent. I didn't think to look into that.
Some people in the comments on YouTube are saying maybe it's called Tragedy.
So what you're saying is the first stage music in House of the Dead 2 is called Tragedy Again, and the second stage is a rearrangement of a song called Tragedy.
Yes.
There we go, baby. That's House of the Dead for you.
Also enemies. They're so smart with their titling.
Oh, God. I kind of love this era of naming songs.
No, it's cool. I like the wind up of the electric guitar and kind of gets the good vibe going to it. Nice bass there. It's nicely done.
Yeah, that bass is good stuff in this song. And then for my second track on the cutting room floor, it's a very, very short track. It is Stage Clear. As you might have guessed, this is the song that plays when you have cleared the stage. I don't know. I think it's fun. It was composed by Tetsuya Kawauchi. I think it's got a really good groove to it. I dig it, short as it is.
It doesn't seem to be a very long soundtrack overall, so yeah, I think it's a fitting little jingle to put in here. Get some orchestra hits going. Yeah.
Yeah, we've, outside of like 3 more stage themes, we've basically talked about the whole soundtrack. It's like 10, 12 tracks long. So what will I never forget about the game? It's the voice acting. If you have never watched a playthrough of House of the Dead 2, oh my god, it's all amazing. It is peak, we just pulled these people off the street outside the studio and asked them to... It's basically what they say about how the first original Resident Evil went, where it was, they looked out the window and if they saw a white person, they asked them if they could do some voice acting for the game. And that was their only criteria. And you can feel it in this one. Sometimes, even when it's just a guy pitching his voice up like this, thank you for saving me. It is a transcendent experience. If you, like me, think that this kind of thing is the funniest damn thing, this is, in terms of acting, probably the closest to the room of video games we've ever gotten. Because even Deadly Premonition isn't this bad. And I love it.
There was also that Michigan Report from Hell video game. That was really terrible as far as voice acting goes. But yeah, no, House of the Dead 2 is up there. It's a game where like I feel like I want to play it, but if I ever do, it's got to be typing version. Like I feel much more confident about my typing skills than I do about light gun pointing first person shooting.
I'm pretty sure Typing of the Dead is another one of those games that a lot of people own on Steam and just don't remember that they own it. Because I own it. Also, apparently House of the Dead 1 and 2 are getting remade for Switch. They don't look good. Like, the updated graphics have very higher this man energy, and I don't like it. But if they touch the voice acting in any way, shape, or form, throw that remake in the trash. It has to stay terrible. It's what makes the game for me, because otherwise, I mean, it's a fine rail shooter. It's fun enough, I guess, but it's that voice acting, baby. Being told to suffer like G did, voiced and inflected like a question, even though it's not a question. That's the stuff I live for. The main villain's voice is so good. Everybody go play Typing of the Dead or watch a playthrough of House of the Dead 2. You will not regret it. It's so good.
Yeah, what the heck? This is not a game that can be saved by better graphics or audio.
In fact, better audio makes it actively worse.
Yeah.
So, in order to transition, we usually grab a fan remix or a fan cover. As much as I believe House of the Dead has a pretty sizable fan base in regards to like arcade players and stuff like that, I really didn't expect to find any soundtrack remixes, because this isn't really a soundtrack people talk about ever. But lo and behold, I found exactly one on YouTube. No more, no less. And that is by the YouTube channel The Legend of Renegade. That's all one word. He did a remix of Theme of the Magician, which he refers to as CPS2 remix. It sounds pretty cool. Please enjoy that, and we will see you in a second.
Well, we move away from the spooks a little bit with the House of the Dead 2. I don't talk about spooky games for October. I'm going to leave that to Joe. Instead, let's talk about Super Monkey Ball. Yeah, finally time to bring this franchise to the show. Although we've mentioned it roughly at a couple points in time with Sega games and whatnot, particularly with a certain director. So let's get into talking about Super Monkey Ball. It was a game that debuted in Japan at the 2001 Amusement Operators Union Trade Show. So it was an arcade trade show. It debuted as Monkey Ball. And it was an arcade cabinet that was running on Sega's Naomi hardware. And it controlled with a distinctive banana-shaped analog stick. Unfortunately, due to the failure of the Sega Dreamcast home console and the company's subsequent restructuring, an enhanced port dubbed Super Monkey Ball was released as a launch title for the GameCube, and this garnered interest as it was Sega's first game published for a Nintendo home console.
Huh, I didn't know it was the first.
It kind of makes sense though, right? I mean, they weren't going to do anything on N64, and then you have GameCube and, well, a GameCube launch title. So as a result, it released on September 14th, 2001 in Japan for Nintendo GameCube. The other launch dates of Nintendo GameCube would mean that it was November 18th, 2001 in North America and May 3rd, 2002 in Europe. Super Monkey Ball was developed by Amusement Vision and published by Sega. What is Super Monkey Ball? It's a 3D platform game where a monkey is inside of a kind of translucent ball on a platform. Platforms of different shapes and inclines and declines and all that. But you're not moving the ball with the analog stick. It's like those old puzzle platform games with marbles where you're moving the tabletop and you have to navigate the marble through the maze, essentially. So the analog stick, whether it was the banana-shaped monkey ball game or the GameCube's analog stick, moves the platform, the level, the floor, essentially. You're tilting an entire set of platforms that make up the level, and it's actually called a floor, and the ball rolls accordingly. If the ball falls off of a floor, an event that's dubbed a fallout, or the in-game timer reaches 0, the player loses one of their 3 lives. There are bananas that are placed on the floor that can be collected for bonus points. Now, there are beginner, advanced, and expert difficulties that can be played from the beginning, with master courses that are unlockable, as well as extra beginner and extra advanced and extra expert floors that you can only get if you go through those difficulties without a continue. And then there's also multiplayer modes, including Monkey Billiards, Monkey Golf, and Monkey Bowling. And these are mini games that support up to 4 players, except for Billiards, which only has 2 players. And then party games of Monkey Race, Monkey Fight, and Monkey Target that support up to 4 players.
Monkey Fight's the best name for any side mode that has ever existed. Oh my god.
Yeah, you got a big punch fist and you gotta send it out for punching. It's pretty great. We'll actually get to talking more about Monkey Fight a little later. There is no story to Super Monkey Ball, though, at least in this beginning game for the franchise. Honestly, you just guide one of 4 playable monkeys, being Ai, Mimi, Baby, and Gon Gon, and they're encased in a transparent ball. You guide them across a suspended series of platforms and through a goal. The big question, can you get the monkey to the goal? Joe, here's where I'll ask you what our experience is with Super Monkey Ball.
Weirdly enough, I've never played a Monkey Ball game in any way, shape, or form. I've seen footage of some. I know Matt wants me to stream my first experience with a Monkey Ball game, but we'll see if that happens. I don't know. I'm aware of its existence, and that's really about as far as it goes.
Yeah, same, honestly. I remember watching Super Monkey Ball being played at a friend's house kind of around the launch of the GameCube, actually, but I've never played it. In fact, I was silly enough to think that you were controlling the monkey with the analog stick. But, as someone who did play with those tabletop marble maze games, I suppose that makes more sense, but it just adds to the fact of the controls are super simplistic, but it's really dependent on the physics engine. Where it then gets to the point of, we'll get to talking about how, this game is being reimagined for current major platforms, and it's being used on the Unity engine for kind of the remastering. And so I guess there are hardcore Super Monkey Ball fans who are noticing differences in how the physics are being calculated. One of those things where I guess reviews that have come out today as of time of recording are saying that 99% of players won't notice, but your speedrunners and your avid players are noticing weird things. And also, especially when it comes to the multiplayer. So that's, I suppose, interesting when it comes to that. But yeah, very minimal knowledge of Super Monkey Ball. Wanted to talk about it because of the release of the game today. And it was interesting to learn just about a franchise in general. Also, how many Super Monkey Ball games there are. Oh my goodness. But let's start with the idea of how it was developed. We've mentioned Amusement Vision before. And this was in our F-Zero GX episode, where we mentioned how Amusement Vision was a branch of the Japanese video game publisher Sega that was created in the year 2000, and it's composed of about 50 people. Now, the Amusement Vision president is a man by the name of Toshihiro Nagoshi. And Nagoshi, we've mentioned a few times in this show before, because he started his work kind of on Daytona USA and all that, but he would later work on F-Zero GX, and he's the Yakuza man. He's the head force behind the Yakuza series, and especially when it came to the West in full force with Yakuza 0 and all that in 2017, and making it the force that it is today. Even so much that, getting all Yakuza'd up as far as appearance for public perception. That is Nagoshi, and he started with this concept of rolling spheres through mazes based on his overall desire to create a game that was instantly possible to understand and play, which was apparently a contrast to the increasingly complex games at Japanese arcades at the time. Early prototypes weren't immediately interesting to look at, though, so designer Mika Kojima designed monkey characters with distinctive ears to put in the ball. And then it was in early 2001 that Sega announced that it was discontinuing the Dreamcast home console and restructuring itself into a platform-agnostic third-party publisher. So when E3 rolls around in May 2001, it's demonstrating a GameCube version of Super Monkey Ball. Nagoshi commented that Nintendo's young demographic made the GameCube an even more fitting console for the title compared to its other console competitors, even maybe from the arcade itself. And he also joked that Nintendo was the only hardware manufacturer that the developers did not hate.
I see. Some Sony stuff must have been happening around then, huh?
I would imagine so. So, to make the game distinct as Super Monkey Ball compared with the original game, the developers enhanced the graphics with new background details, as well as reflections and particle effects. They also spent an additional 6 months incorporating the 6 multiplayer modes into the game, kind of creating those from scratch, and they introduced Gon as a 4th playable character. Watching a long play of Super Monkey Ball was certainly interesting because I immediately noticed, and I'm sure those who played the game at the time did as well, the bananas in the game display the Dole Food Company logo.
What?
It is the weirdest thing to see all these bananas with a red Starburst logo and the white Dole, D-O-L-E letters on it. And there must have been some really good product placement there at the time. But this was removed in the 2005 PlayStation 2 and Xbox version called Super Monkey Ball Deluxe. And this was due to a licensing dispute. You don't say that the terms of the contract must have expired in that time.
I did not know that at all. That's bizarre. That's like Energizer in Pikmin weird.
Yeah. Yeah, so you learn something new every day, at least listening to this podcast. There was also a 2006 study that was conducted by the Beth Israel Medical Center that found that surgeons who played Super Monkey Ball for 20 minutes prior to performing a surgical drill finished slightly faster and made fewer mistakes. Apparently, the data justified making that conclusion. Super Monkey Ball was reviewed very well, with an 87 as its Metacritic average and an 89% on game rankings. Critics overall praised the simplicity and the subtle depth of its control scheme, as well as the new multiplayer modes that weren't present in its arcade counterpart, but they also felt that its presentation was overall lacking. And yeah, I get that. It's a really bare bones sort of just menu overall, just get into the gameplay. The lack of story overall, I think at the time they may have been expecting some, what is the point of the monkeys in this world? And maybe there's some cutscenes. No, just it's really cut and dry. This is the gameplay. Get used to it. So I see that. It doesn't seem like it sold over 1 million copies, especially when you compare the top-selling GameCube games of all time. But it was a commercial success. Sega was happy with its sales as a launch title for GameCube, though Nagoshi was disappointed by the game's performance in Japan. Not really any awards to speak of for Super Monkey Ball, but in 2009, Edge magazine ranked the game number 39 on its list of the 100 best games to play today. So it's kind of endured as well because it started a franchise. There were apparently 19 games in the Super Monkey Ball series after this one, starting with the direct sequel, 2002's Super Monkey Ball 2 for Nintendo GameCube, and most recently, Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania, which is a reimagining of the first 2 games and its deluxe content, out today on all major platforms. But yeah, a bunch of games for weird platforms, like a game for Nokia N-Gage.
Is that the first time the N-Gage has come up on this show?
You know, it might be, come to think about it. Wow. Although there have been fewer games, certainly in the last several years. You had a couple years ago, that was the Banana Blitz HD, which was the remaster of the Wii game. And then you have this one as well with, this out today with a reimagining of 1 and 2 and Deluxe. As far as like continuing legacy, you have the characters making appearances in different games. Ai has appeared as a playable character in Sonic Riders and Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing, while both Ai and Mimi make playable appearances in Sega Superstars Tennis and Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed. I saw an interesting quote about the 2020 video game Fall Guys Ultimate Knockout, and how it was described by a reviewer, Tom Wiggins of Stuff Magazine, as Super Monkey Ball for the Fortnite generation. And not wrong.
Also, quite a collection of words in one sentence.
Yeah, it's a kind of a mashing up of a couple concepts there. I'll take it. It is interesting how the composers for this game are Hidenori Shoji. Oh, that's going to make a lot of sense real soon, as he's been like the Nagoshi composer guy. Haruyoshi Tomita. Oh, hey, he also composed for the House of the Dead 2. It's a name you just mentioned quite recently. And Sakae Osumi. So Sakae Osumi was listed second on the Wikipedia page. So when picking out this game, all right, let's talk about him, because we've already talked about Hidenori Shoji. And it's interesting to look at Sakae Osumi's career, because he is not a composer today. Let's put it that way. There is no birth or blood info out there for Sakae Osumi. I know, weird not to even get a blood sort of, what's the blood type there? All I could really gather is that he attended Waseda University for a Bachelor of Science in Social Science, and then he started working at Sega Japan in April 1997 in their arcade business operation division. But then he moved to be a game designer at Sega in 1998. Eventually, he would move up to direct Sonic Rush and Sonic Rush Adventure. He would then be a producer at Sega Europe from 2008 to 2013, and then a director of business strategy at Capcom from 2013 to 2018. So a lot of the big decisions of Capcom turning that corner and making it big, I guess, had to be partially responsible through Sakae Osumi. He is now at Niantic's Tokyo studio as a senior producer. So there is credit for Sakae Osumi as working on sound design on games like Spike Out, Planet Harriers, Super Monkey Ball, Spiker's Battle, and Virtua Striker 2002. He is also credited as a lyricist on the Sonic Rush Adventure title theme, titled A New Venture. But, it doesn't seem like he's really credited with any specific tracks for composing. He was part of the sound design team. So, honestly, it made for some interesting research. More specifically, let's get to talking about the 5 critical tracks for Super Monkey Ball, because, it's interesting. It's some early 2000s Sega, let's put it that way. We have to start with, it makes sense, the main menu theme. I feel like when you're starting out a franchise, you have to kind of get on the right foot musically, or at least get something that's going to stick with players and kind of catch their ears when they're playing the game for the first time and maybe returning to the game on multiple playthroughs. And so the main menu theme makes sense here. It kind of starts off, at least in the piece, as what almost seems like a knockoff DK rap, where you're getting some monkey noise samples in there. But then it turns into this, peppy piece with give me some vocal sample. And it's just got this kind of electro pop energy to it. I feel like, especially if you're navigating through the menu really quickly, you may just be hearing that kind of DJ monkey mix, but then it actually turns into a pretty catchy piece, which I found really interesting. But a good starter piece for the Critical 5, especially when you're beginning a franchise.
It's really groovy, and I dig it a lot. But for some reason, hearing this song, all I can think of are those memes that's like, my last 2 brain cells. And that's what I think about when I hear this song. Also, I'm just realizing the logo for Super Monkey Ball is just the Powerball logo, and that I don't know what to do with that information.
You win the jackpot by going through the goal?
I guess. Is that how the Powerball works? I've never bought a Powerball ticket. But yeah, this is a really, really good grooving song, and the vocal sample is weird, but does add a lot.
Yeah, it adds a little bit of character to it. I think when we get into more of the stage themes, though, it kind of gets more into that electro pop. And so let's get an example of that with number 2 on the Critical 5 for Super Monkey Ball. This is Jungle. As we've mentioned many times on the show before, we are at a time where there was no soundtrack ever really released at the time, especially in the early 2000s. So this is a lot of just guessing what the title is or fan guesses at a title. At the same time, no real indication on who actually composed these. So, on the video version, we have Hidenori Shoji et al., because it could have been any of the 3 composers there on the sound design team. But I'm going to guess that it's Hidenori Shoji for most of these. Just seems to be his style for a lot of this. And for this piece in particular, the jungle theme plays on the beginning floors for each of the difficulty tracks. So it's a kind of a jungly appearance with a lot of vines and a lot of green. And if you're thinking, how do you play Super Monkey Ball? Let's play Super Monkey Ball for the first time. Let's try that beginner difficulty. Or even, I want to try a harder advanced difficulty. You're hearing this piece right away. And so I feel it's like a really important establishing track. You get that thumping bass drum kick going, a nice repeating bass line. These synth chords come in, and then it just kind of plays with that foundation from there. A really catchy, grooving introductory piece for the game, just whichever difficulty you pick.
I feel like this also shares some of the genetics to like what Sonic music would become around the same time.
Sure.
Something about the percussion, I think, really makes me think like a 3D Sonic level or something like that. No, this song is absolutely fantastic and manages to be even more groovy than the last one. I dig it. I dig it a lot.
I feel like that won't be the last time that we make some Sonic comparisons, because that's pretty much right around this time for Sega. Let's get to number 3 on the Critical 5, though, and this is Monkey Mall. Whoever named this track Monkey Mall, A+.
Yeah.
So this plays on the kind of the middle floors on the advanced difficulty and some of the earlier floors on the expert difficulty. The stage is kind of like this dark, starry background with a lot of neon signs for different like stores. And so I think that's kind of where you get the mall motif there. But again, it's another thumping electronic track, but I feel like you get some more fun instruments in this one. You get this kind of like electric guitar flutter with this in there, and eventually you get like these wah, 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 kind of more distorted kind of instruments adding in there. Eventually later in the piece, you get like these jazz piano going in there. I feel like with all the electronic MIDI instruments that are possible, these are some interesting samples, and I feel like it plays pretty well here. I think this is one of my favorite tracks in all of what I'll present here.
I think I agree with it being among my favorites. I think it fights between this and Jungle for my favorites, but this song sounds like it should be playing in like the shop I was gonna just say sci-fi RPG, but no. This is The World Ends With You.
Oh, okay.
That's what this reminds me of. The music that plays when you walk into shops in both The World Ends With You games. That's the immediate vibe that I get. But yeah, that jazz piano is just fun. I wonder if they agree that it sounded like a shop theme, whoever gave the track this name, because Monkey Mall Shop, I don't know why else they'd call it that. But yeah, I don't know. This is a really, really good piece, though.
There were apparently a lot of comments, especially in YouTube, like, oh, my hand cramping from these difficult levels, especially Expert 7, and then also, I guess, similarly, Advanced 15. I guess those must be especially difficult floors that people were having war flashbacks to. But for those players who got really good, they would hear this track, number 4 on the Critical 5. This is Master. I don't know. I just think it's a really neat piece. Obviously, this plays on the floors for the master difficulty, which you have to have quite a good bit of skill to unlock in the first place. You have to like unlock and beat each of the extra stages. So you got to be really good at the game. It's a weird color theming for the master levels, though. It's like a lot of light yellows and greens. I don't know if that would feel especially rewarding. But it feels like this track kind of plays it a little bit safe in a way, kind of like those colors do. And if anything, I just feel like it's like roller disco. So I don't know if it's necessarily like one of the best tracks, but I feel like it had to be here for rewarding those who actually went the extra mile to unlock this level of difficulty of the floors. And it kind of keeps a lot of the similar theming that the other tracks have shown so far.
The bass line is going real hard in this. I guess it wouldn't make sense if it was a more intense song, because I guess Monkey Ball is not the kind of game that you want super intense music with, now that I think about it. But when I hear it like described as master difficulty, I don't know, you expect like the music to be like, you think you can do this? No, you can't. And I just don't get that vibe from this song. It's weird, but that's probably for the best.
Yeah, it's a tough balance, right? Because we'll hear on the cutting room floor where there's a track that it's like, oh, this goes hard for the last little bit of difficulty of tracks. But I feel like if you hit this level, maybe you just want kind of like a Nirvana chill out piece.
You just got to be able to zone out and become all instinct.
Precisely. Yeah, don't have the music distract you at all. So that's an interesting play and give and take. And I think it was worth at least bringing to the Critical 5 here. But we'll wrap things up with an interesting track in that how the sequence was designed. Number 5 on the Critical 5 for Super Monkey Ball is Credits. From what I could tell from the long play and from comments on YouTube and elsewhere around the internet, there does not seem to be a skip credits button. And so on the play through the game that the long player did, there were multiple sequences of playing through the credits because it's an interactive credits level. And you have the letters of the different names that appear kind of drop in as obstacles for you to navigate around, but a whole bunch of bananas. Like, this is your way to collect a whole bunch of bananas if you didn't necessarily on your playthrough, if you're like speed running and things like that. So yeah, a bunch of bananas, a long forced played section. And so if you're playing the game, you're going to likely hear this at the very least on the beginner difficulty. And it has these kind of little brass hits in there, which, not the best samples, but you really get the electronic drum beat going in there. And even then a slappy little bass coming in, which is pretty catchy. I feel like more I included it though because it is a forced interactive credits level that you're going to go through multiple times if you play the different difficulties. So I'm sure those who played it are well familiar with this song.
Yeah, those brass hits, those sure are 2001 trumpet midis. Need I say more?
Yeah, we're picky about them, and these are not the best.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of cool on this song. I don't have a lot to add. I feel like it's fine. The bass part is good. I agree, but it's fine.
It's amazing how the different samples are right between a bass, like a bass guitar, and then bop, bop. So, okay. Let's get to a couple tracks on the cutting room floor. I have two. One of these is the aforementioned Storm. Would you guess that Storm plays on the final floors of expert difficulty? See, this kind of goes almost counter in a way. Like, we were talking about how with Master, like, you just want to zone out and don't pay attention to music. But this is really amping up that intensity, that pressure. This almost made the critical 5, I'll be honest. Like, it was tough kind of trying to pick which to pick, but this at least had to be on the cutting room floor because it sounds cool, right? It's a totally different genre with that hard rock, yeah, vibes of like, you're pushing it, you got to make it, and don't mess up on these last few floors.
This is where my dear boy Hidenori Shoji has been hiding this whole time. I see.
Yeah.
This is a Shoji song to a T. That guitar sounds straight out of a Yakuza soundtrack. This song is really cool. This is weird to say, but like, I think something more akin to Master fits better with what type of game this is. Because there are like scientific studies that are like, hey, if you listen to like rock music or classical music, that it actually does have a like effect on your concentration, and rock doesn't help and classic can help. And so I figured that's why everything sounded a little more low key. But this song comes in and just blows me out of the water. It's really good. I don't know if it fits for what I now know about Monkey Ball.
But you know, if it does not help, it maybe just only adds to that intensity and that stress of pushing through for the final little bit. So they could be onto something there. I also kind of get like Shadow the Hedgehog vibes from Sonic Adventure 2 battles. So if we're talking about like Sega music at that same time. It's interesting that you bring up Hidenori Shoji and Yakuza though, because I heard this track and I had to put it on at least the cutting room floor. This one is Monkey Fight Menu. Haven't talked a lot about music where it's going to be for the multiplayer modes in this game, but might as well include this one, presuming it's the setup menu music for the Monkey Fight mode, where you're in a ball and you got a big old fist attached and you gotta punch the other players. So you need this kind of grungy, tough attitude, and oh, this is absolutely Hidenori Shoji. I don't need any credits to tell me otherwise, because this might as well also be in a Yakuza game. You talk about a Yakuza track, this is where it was hiding.
Yeah, specifically, this sounds like the track that plays when you're like fighting your way through a building.
Yeah.
In a Yakuza game, 100%. I think I like Storm a little bit more, but yeah, this is another one that's just, yep, that's Hidenori Shoji to a T. That's Yakuza. That's where it is. That's where it's been hiding.
I agree. Storm is a cooler piece and it's more complex, but there's something about the simple loop here and the instrument sound that is just like, oh yeah, you know exactly like what you're tracking to, or at the very least, when you're creating Yakuza, what are you pulling back on from your past? What are you going to for inspiration? I was struck by this song and just how much it sounds like his future work. So what will I never forget about Super Monkey Ball? Well, there's not a lot there in the first place, considering it only started with the research on this game. I still have these visions of like watching it at a friend's house, and that's really what I think most about Super Monkey Ball. Do I have the itch now to go and try Banana Mania? Not necessarily. Maybe as a rental, give it a shot. I still more have to get on the same page of like, you're moving the floor, you're moving the platform. Like maybe when I watch that, but you know what? Definitely go check out Super Monkey Ball speedruns, like at AGDQ, SGDQ, because I've seen some of those before and those are always incredibly impressive. So if you're a fan and you haven't seen a speedrun of this game, definitely do yourself a favor and check it out.
Yeah, high level Monkey Ball is insane. The people who are really good at Monkey Ball might as well not be human. It is crazy. I wish I was that good at any video game on this earth.
You know the thing in like a marble maze when you flip the platform so that the marble goes flying across the map? That is what speedruns are like. It's bonkers.
It's insane.
Because there's no jump button. Let's reiterate. There is no jump button, I think, until Banana Blitz on the Wii. So like it is that simple for controls. And just to get vertical at all is madness.
I think my main memory of Monkey Ball watching somebody play it is Vinny from Vine Sauce did a stream of Banana Blitz when it got re-released on the Switch, which as far as I could tell, Banana Blitz is one of the least popular games in the franchise. So that people were kind of mad when it was the one that was getting brought forward to Switch. And just watching that poor man fall apart over the course of like a 20-minute highlight reel. Beautiful. I might play Banana Mania. I don't know. We'll see. I'm kind of with you where it's like, I don't know if I want to go and spend $60 on this.
Yeah.
So who knows? Also, Metroid comes out the next day. So
yeah, I think some priorities are there already to be had on Switch. But a fun episode nonetheless to talk about Sega games from this kind of time, late 90s, early 2000s, that started as arcade games.
With a tinge of sadness to it, because the Club Segas in, I think, Ikebukuro recently closed.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh.
One of the biggest, most iconic arcades in Tokyo closed a couple weeks ago officially.
Wow, I didn't even occur to me, but yeah, that is really sad. Wow. Even still, weird ways of controlling, these games with the light gun, and even for the original Monkey Ball, the banana-shaped analog stick. I feel like it's a good theming overall, but yeah, wow, a little bit of sadness twinged there, huh? Well, that will do it for us this week on Original Sound Chat. You can find me on Twitter at PeteSpeakEasy. Joe is over at StringPixel. The video version of the show is on the Rhymes with Asia YouTube channel, but it's that MP3 podcast version that you want, hosted by Anonymous Dinosaur at anondino.squarespace.com. That's where Joe's other podcast, Smasherpieces, is hosted. And Smasherpieces will soon be complete for planning out its games with the character for Super Smash Bros. That is being revealed today. Again, we don't know what that character is, but we'll find out soon what that last game for Smasherpieces will be. You can find Smasherpieces and Original Sound Chat wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, even on Spotify, where we have a podcast feed of our episodes, but also a Spotify playlist, where if we talk about a video game track on this show and it's on Spotify, it's getting added to that big playlist. Joe, is anything being added this week?
Sadly, no. There are a lot of holes in Sega's offerings when it comes to music to stream. It's pretty much just Yakuza and Sonic, and maybe you'll get one other thing that you didn't expect, but probably not.
That's unfortunate, but there's plenty of music, plenty to listen there. And when you're done listening, you can find us on social media at Soundchat OST. Leave some feedback for the show on how we're doing with these episodes, and also suggestions for games that you'd like us to cover in the future. We're trying to fill out the last of these 2021 games and our episodes, and we'd like your suggestions. Joe, who are we talking about next week?
Well, it's funny you mention listener requests, because next week I'm doing a listener request when we talk about Shusaku Uchiyama.
I will be talking about Serena McKinney. That's also an interesting one as well. Should be a good pairing of games there. To play us out, I was hoping and expecting that there'd be a Super Monkey Ball music remix or cover, whether it's on OC Remix, YouTube, anywhere. No. If anything, it was directing me to videos of an unsavory character on YouTube. So that's really strange. But yeah, no covers, unfortunately, for Super Monkey Ball, at least from the original game. So let's pick another track from the soundtrack. And we're going to go with Underwater for this one. This is a pretty neat one. I kind of feel like it has a Sonic theme as well, especially for an underwater level. The synths here are kind of super appropriate because it has that sort of feeling, that kind of blue feel, if that makes sense. And the bass gives you a kind of submerged feeling. So it's a neat track. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for listening this week on Original Sound Chat. We'll see you next time. Take care.